Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us for this evening's applicant-led open house for 1431 McAdoo's Lane. Before we begin, we just have a few introductory notes. My name is Mark Nardi. I'm a communications officer with the City of Kingston, and I will be facilitating this session. However, this will be an applicant-led open house. As a result, it is not a statutory public meeting. This meeting will be conducted by project consultants and is not facilitated by city staff, and it will be live streamed and recorded. So you should have seen a disclaimer as you joined today's session. It is not only being recorded, it is live streamed on the city's YouTube page. At any point in time after this session, you can visit the City of Kingston's YouTube page and watch this recording again. And for your awareness, video, microphone, and chat features have been disabled as you join the webinar. Questions and comments, however, that you do share may be publicly visible to everyone, so please bear that in mind. We do have a few notes about technology troubleshooting, as this is an online webinar. If you're having a hard time viewing the presentation or any of the speakers, the first thing you can do is adjust your view options. You should see that in a drop-down menu, just at the top or bottom of your screen, just depending on how you have Zoom configured. You can also visit Get Involved Kingston, where we have a list of online engagement resources that you can use to troubleshoot. You can also try rejoining using the link, or you can call into the public meeting using the phone number that you would have seen on the city's calendar event at cityofkingston.ca/events, or in the public notice that would have been mailed out. And lastly, as mentioned earlier, you can follow along at the city's YouTube channel or watch the recording after the fact. There will be an opportunity for individuals to share questions or comments during this. You can ask questions or share comments one of two ways. First and foremost, you can use the Q&A tool. And you can see at the bottom here, we have them highlighted. The Q&A tool is just a bottom button on your taskbar. If you open that up, you can type your questions in. At the end of the presentation, applicants will be able to go through and answer your questions. You can also raise your hand. Again, the button should just be in the bottom of your taskbar there. If you click the raise hand button, we'll see a little notification by your name. At that point, when we're ready to get to you, we will invite you to unmute yourself. You can go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll mute you after, and then you're allowed a follow-up question as well. So it's the raise hand feature or the Q&A. We ask that you don't use the chat, as it's a little harder to track questions coming through, and we want to make sure we're not missing any questions. Lastly, we have the guidelines for participation up on the screen here. As this is a city-facilitated session, we do ask that any attendees bear this in mind as they are participating. So we'll give you a second just to give them a quick look there. If you do have any questions or concerns about the guidelines for participation, you can go ahead and raise your hand now. Having said that, we do have 3 attendees here with us tonight, so we will go ahead and pass things over to the applicants to get things started.
All right, thank you, Mark. My name is Mike Keene, and I'm a land use planner with Photon Consultants, and I'm here on behalf of the developer for this project. The developer is Kimco Steel, and the owner is Greg Rosen, and Greg is on the call with us today. We also have Martin Skolnick, who is the project manager for the file. And this is an application that would see the requirement for an official plan amendment to a rural industrial use, a zoning bylaw amendment, and a site plan control application. Next slide, please. So the question that most people will want to know is why this application? And the primary reason is a very booming construction industry, certainly Ontario-wide. Probably for that matter, North America wide right now. And Kimco Steel is a major provider of structural steel. And if you're familiar with their main operations on John Counter Boulevard, you'll know that they're operating at full capacity, and you'll know that they offer a full suite of operations, everything from steel sales, custom fabrication, as well as their recycling operation. So what I want to be very clear on with this application is that this is a proposal to allow for the storage of steel. This is not the extension of the recycling operations on this site. And the way steel arrives in this area is by lake freighter. So when steel comes in on a large boat, you can appreciate that you need a large amount of land to lay that steel down and store it temporarily while it's being sold and processed, cut, whatever the case might be. So these lands were strategic for Kimco because they're very close to their head office location and also close to the 401, which allows for very efficient transporting of that steel, particularly once it arrives on those lake freighters. So again, I want to just say one more time that John Counter Boulevard will be Kimco's only recycling center. This is a rural industrial use for steel laydown that's being proposed. Next slide, please. So this slide is giving you an area context in terms of the property's location. And you can see how it's located just north of the 401, up Perth Road or Division Street when you're on the urban side of the city. And on the image, we've labeled some of the uses that are in the area. With the most recent one I'm anticipating being developed soon would be the automotive wrecking yard on the corner where McAdoo's Lane wraps. And you can see from this slide, there are a few residential uses on McAdoo's Lane, but for the most part, we're seeing rural industrial uses and extractive uses, as well as waste management uses. So this proposed use would categorize as a rural industrial use. Next slide, please. We're just zooming in a little closer on the site. And if you're familiar with the property, it was the old horse racetrack, and it hasn't been used as a formal racetrack for many years, although the track has still been used for practice by a few horse owners in the area. That use has since ceased with Kimco taking ownership of the property. This is a large site. It's 28 hectares overall and has frontage on McAdoo's Lane on both its west and northern frontage, as well as some frontage on Perth Road. But access to the site would be entirely from those existing entrances that exist on McAdoo's Lane. You can also see from this picture how much exposed bedrock exists in this area, just again, the nature of our city. And you can actually see some of those former uses and the exposed rock that exists on the property. Next slide, please. So this is now taking that aerial image and laying a conceptual plan over top of it. And because it might be hard to see on your screen, I'll describe this to you. The laydown of the steel is focused on the east side of the property. And on the northmost quadrant, a roughly 10,000 square foot building is proposed. And that building would store the equipment that actually picks up the steel and puts it on the trucks and takes it off the trucks. And it would obviously have a small office for shipping and receiving, along with those amenities that would support an office like your kitchen and bathroom. So it's a small building with the primary use being a large plot of land to store steel for shipment to other locations. And you can see on my slide, I've labeled some of the other uses like a weigh scale and a charging station. The property, it will be a mix of fencing. So it will be entirely secured with fencing. And there will be solid fencing along the McAdoo's frontage, essentially where you have treed lines. Where the trees kind of stop, there will be a conversion to solid fencing for visual and privacy reasons. And across the northmost frontage, that will be true as well. There will be fencing, solid fencing that ties in with the building, both from a landscaping and for a privacy and security function. Next slide, please. So right now, the official plan shows this site as rural lands, and you can see some of the other symbols that are shown on this slide. One in the wrecking yard that is shown in kind of the brown color should actually be shown as the waste management area designation now, as they went through a planning approval a few months ago. And the city's mapping doesn't reflect that yet. So I point that out, just acknowledging there's other change in the area that's not necessarily perfectly reflected by city mapping. Next slide, please. So this slide is showing our proposal to go to the rural industrial designation, which is shown with the brown and black hatched symbol. What you're seeing on the slide as well is just to the north of the site is the large quarry operations. Immediately to the east, you've got the cement plant, and you've got Manitoulin Transport, as well as some more waste management uses to the north. Next slide, please. Because this was a racetrack, or a former horse racetrack, it has an open space style of zoning on it, as well as a small corner that was zoned for agricultural use. And the site-specific zoning was acknowledging that former racetrack, the former go-kart track, and it was allowing outdoor concerts, likely because of the bandstands. The A1 zone, which is a small corner in the southwest, was your typical A1, allowing agricultural uses and a few other random uses like conservation and livestock operations. So it's really not reflective of what's taking place in the area already. Next slide, please. So the proposed zoning for the site is to go to a general industrial zone. And again, this is focused on the proposed uses. So this would allow general industrial uses, but it would not allow any of the recycling uses, which are typically categorized as a waste management use. And so that's very specific in this application, is this general industrial use proposal. And because this is also an outdoor storage use, we're proposing some site-specific definitions to define what a steel yard is. And it's very similar to a lumber yard that stores wood outside, but in this case, it's storing steel outside. So that's why site-specific provisions are being proposed, is really to recognize this steel use and to allow the open storage across the property as a primary use. Next slide, please. So overall, one of my roles as a land use planner is to look at a number of things and to ultimately determine whether or not an application is good land use planning. And in the case of this application, we're in a rural industrial area surrounded by other sites that also need large blocks of land for their operations. They're not water or sewer intensive uses like this one. This one just requires a large piece of land to store that steel when it comes off the lake freighters. So ultimately, I do believe this is the appropriate location for such an application to take place, and therefore the subsequent applications would be appropriate to process. Next slide, please. This is a slide just to help folks understand where we are in the process. So as was introduced by the city clerk, this is actually a process being led by the developer, even though we're on the city's virtual platform. So this is an opportunity tonight to ask questions about the project. Following the open house, the city will hold a public meeting, and this is held by the city's planning committee. That planning committee is made up of 6 council members, and that's an opportunity also for people to voice their support or opposition for the project. And right now we don't have a date for the public meeting. Following the public meeting, staff proceed with writing a recommendation report that goes to the planning committee again. And that's another opportunity for the public to raise either comments or concerns about an application. So again, we don't have a date for that because we're still leading into the public meeting as the next step. Following those two planning committee meetings, the ultimate decision rests with the City of Kingston Council. So following a staff recommendation going to planning committee, council then makes a decision on that recommendation that is given to them. And their decision is ultimately usually to approve with conditions or to deny an application. Once council makes a decision, then you again have another time period, which is an appeal period, where if you disagree with their decision and you've ensured you've voiced concerns at these various public meetings, then you would have appeal rights to that decision that's been made. Now, following this official plan and zoning process, there's also a site plan control application. And the purpose of that application is I think, most easily described as a picture of exactly what's taking place on the site. So it's going to say exactly where stormwater is being drained to, where the building is located, how entrances are controlled, fencing. Every detail and aspect of the development is controlled by the site plan control application. Next slide, please. So I have two separate slides here. I have a slide for comments and also a slide for questions. Mr. Clerk, I don't know if you want to jump back in, but I'm at the point where I'm finished my presentation and I'm pleased to assist with questions. I'm just not, I apologize, I can't remember if you need to add your one more slide in here first.
Thanks. Yeah. So at this point, actually, we can just leave it with the applicant team. So any attendees, and it looks like we have about 4 people in attendance. Just a reminder that you can go ahead and ask questions one of 2 ways: put them in the Q&A or raise your hand. This first slide will be for comments. If you have any comments, feel free. If you do have questions, we have a separate slide for that. So I'll leave it over with the applicant team to manage and answer questions. If someone raises their hand, I'll let you know, and I can invite them to unmute themselves.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clerk. And again, remember to use the Q&A function because it's actually easier to record comments than using the chat function. So we ask you to raise your hand and speak, or to write comments into the Q&A, and we'd be pleased to assist with any comments or questions. So I'm looking at the attendee list with the 5 attendees. I'm not seeing any raised hands. And I'm just going to look at the Q&A to see if there's anything in the Q&A. And at the moment, there's no Q&A.
Did you want to move ahead to questions, and then we can just kind of fold questions and comments together?
Certainly. Let's move to the next slide for a few moments then, which is questions. I'm not seeing any typing. I'm not seeing, again, any hands raised, Mr. Clerk. But certainly we can leave this open for a few minutes.
Sure. We can give it another few minutes if anyone wants to take some time to collect thoughts, put questions together, or anything like that.
I'm not seeing anything, Mr. Clerk.
So I'll go ahead and advance it to the final slide if that's all right with you. This is just, again, another facilitator note on the staff's city side of things, I should say. So just want to thank everyone for taking the time to come out and listen to the presentation from the applicants. If you do have any additional questions or comments that you would like to share with staff, please email them to the contact noted on screen here. Staff can then pass your comments along to the applicants as well. If you would like something noted for public record or otherwise, just please indicate so. And if you would like your contact information shared for follow-up from the applicants, you can go ahead and note that as well. But it's the email noted on the screen there. We can still leave it up for a few more minutes here, just in case anyone has any other questions. But again, I'd just like to reiterate, thanks for taking the time to attend. All right, so seeing no additional questions, I'd just like to once again thank everyone for taking the time to attend, and just make note again of the email on the screen. And seeing that, thanks very much and have a great evening.
Thank you for assisting us with this, Mr. Clerk.